Will the New Orleans Pelicans figure it out this season? I got 4 reasons telling you why maybe they could. Let's talk about it.
You must know that first. Can't nothing and nobody fade what we trying to do and what we about to do. Second thing is, we got this game on our level. You understand what I'm saying?
Welcome to another episode of In Space. I am your host, Chris Connor. Shout out to the good people that support us at DraftKings Sportsbook, Birdsall Law Firm, as well as Jägermeister. You will hear from DraftKings Sportsbook again before the end of this episode. What I have for you here today is part 1 of a part 2 series, where episode 1 today, I'm going to tell you why the Pelicans can figure it out. I'm going to give you 4 reasons for those that consider themselves to be optimistic about the Pelicans roster. Whatever it is that you believe in, if you were a big believer in what the team was doing on the way leading into January before Zion Williamson's injury, if you believe in the parts, if you believe in the culture, if you believe in some of the additions, some of the changes that were made, I got a feeling that the reasons that I give today why the Pelicans will figure it out, you might agree with them. In fact, I think they may all be on your list of why you think that they will figure it out. Now, I'm not here to tell you what figuring it out necessarily means, because you'll know it when you see it. Figuring it out at the end of the day could be subjective. Some may think, success is in the eyes of the beholder. It's in the eyes of the one who's constructing it. So my definition of success and your definition may be different, but I still think the reasons that I have, it kind of fits the same line of thinking. Episode 2, I will tell you why they won't figure it out. So as always, there's going to be some balance here. But here's part 1. And we just going to start it off. We're going to get right into it. The first reason the Pelicans will figure it out in this upcoming season is because they have to. Make no mistake about it, they have to. You may not believe the trade rumors that happened over the summer. You may not think that Brandon or Zion were discussed. You may not believe that in the past either of them have been discussed. I mean, we believe what we want to, and I'm not here to change your mind. But what I am here to tell you is that if the Pelicans disappoint this season and they don't figure it out, change will and change has to happen. And while some look at some moves around the edges, some may look at CJ McCollum for CBA, CBA reasons. You're going to be looking at either Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram. And I think that's what this organization will be tasked to do if this team struggles again, or this team disappoints, or the two of them can't stay healthy, or they can't play enough games together. Because at that point, we're going into year 5 of the Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, the David Griffin relationship. We're looking at year 3 currently right now of Willie Green. If this team does not figure it out, something is going to shift. And I don't know who it necessarily will be, but there's no way you could do another year. And when you look at the changes that the team has made, which wasn't much of anything, you can tell that a lot of the responsibility falls on number 1 and number 14 to figure it out together. You can argue who it falls on the most between those two, but it feels as if the organization is saying either by design or by necessity, you two have enough parts. And then when you get to CJ McCollum, you 3 have enough parts. And then Trey Murphy, and then they may believe that. But before we finish, the following, the finishing pieces, before we add some of the other things that this team needs to really be complete, none of it's going to matter if Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram can't figure it out together. We've seen them individually. We've seen them as individuals do some amazing things for certain stretches over the past, 5 years post the Anthony Davis trade. Now it's time for them to do it together and for them to win. So I think they have to. Brandon Ingram has an extension that's on their way. We know what Zion's already signed. I think if they don't figure it out, one of them will have to be moved. Their decision will have to be made. And it may be a controversial one way or another. Number two, the second reason that the Pelicans will figure it out. Medical staff changes. It's one of those things that goes, you kind of damn if you do, damn if you don't. It's, it can be overlooked, it can be underlooked. In regards to the impact that it will have. Now, I know David Griffin just said not too long ago, he talked about the financial bandwidth that was given in that area. And, we know about the whispers about Aaron Nelson and some of the things that's come out, him being reassigned or let go. And there's been some talks about it not just being the names that you expect to have issues with maybe some of his philosophies or some of his ways of doing things in that building and his relationship with the players. If that is the case, I can understand why you made a move. Aaron will have to tell his side at some point. And I'm not here to tell you, I'm not here to speak to his side because I don't know it. But if there were changes that were made and they were made on the behalf of the players, then you would have to think that could benefit them in one way or another. And that's outside of Aaron Nelson being relocated or relieved or whatever the case may be. What other changes did they make? I don't have that particular news in front of me. And I probably should have asked. And I'm sure we will know at some point. But I find it interesting that David Griffin mentioned that was something that he harped on in a recent interview that he had, talking about some of the things that he was excited about. Very curious to see how it will benefit some of the players that struggled with injuries last year, and maybe some of the players that are rehabbing now, with Trey Murphy, for example, Jose Alvarado, again, who also ended the season last year hurt. But most importantly, we know who we're thinking about, Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. Could these changes, and we've heard about the rifts and the problems that Zion and even some that Brandon had with the staff in the past. Will these changes benefit them? And could that be a key that we're not thinking about and getting more games out of, not just those two, but so many others, if this team is going to have the success that a lot of people would like? If they do, I think it's going to be one of those things that we need to revisit once the season is over with. Number 3, internal leaps. And that's just not with players. Willie Green is going into year 3. It's going to be very curious. If this team does figure it out, you're going to have to assume that one of the reasons is because he's improved as a coach. He's improved in some of the things maybe he lacked, with maybe, some consistency in certain areas of time management, his added relationship building with everyone on the team, whether it be young guys, older guys, whatever the case may be, him just continuing to grow as a leader and as a head coach in this profession. Willie being able to grow, continuing his, the advancement in his thoughts and the people around him offensively could help. We talk about internal leaps. We talk about medical staff changes. What about coaching staff changes? We talk about James Borrego, adding him and some of the offensive, would that give this team more offensive organization, giving Willie the opportunity to build a staff that fits more of the people that he would like versus previous staffs, people that he trusts? Could help. Could be something that we're looking at the end. That's one side of things. And we'll, and we can, we talk about Aaron Miles that was added as well. Was Casey Hill. I believe he also got reassigned. I don't know exactly his role right now or if he's still with the team, but that's an example. You're bringing back, Collins, who, was a part of, people inside the organization, had glowing things to say about his ability as a defensive coordinator of sorts. So the defense definitely wasn't the problem, and this hasn't been a problem really for Willie Green. I would say as a whole, the offense is something that they have to figure out, and there's some other elements that even when the team wasn't whole, that I think the coaching staff were responsible for. Those guys make internal leaps. That's going to be tied to them figuring it out. And then we got some of the players. Okay, Trey Murphy unfortunately will start the season. You know, it's not injury reserve, but he will start the season not playing. He will start the season in rehab mode, trying to get back on the floor. But he's a guy, once he's back on the floor and he's comfortable, whether it takes him a couple weeks or a month, or he finds it right away. He was a guy that we were talking about when we were talking about internal leaps, and who knows what that could look like, because the more and more you hear people talk about him, his ceiling continues to grow for what people believe or think about him around the league. What if Herb Jones' shooting improves? And here's the thing, like about figuring it out with this team, there is a lot of what ifs. You know, that's what makes this conversation interesting. There's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of if onlys. There's a lot of we'll have to see. But Herb Jones is one of those people. We know what he can do defensively. If some of the things I've heard about James Borrego in utilizing individual talents and tying it into team structure is true, well, some of the stretches that we've seen Herb Jones with the basketball in his hand, and if he's able to become even a little bit of a better shooter, if Herb Jones is average for the stretch of a season, that could be a very important internal leap. And then there's always someone that we're not considering and that we're thinking about that comes out of nowhere. You know, Dyson Daniels is in year 2. Last season, it was Najee Marshall. The year before that, it was Josh Hart. There's always somebody that jumps way past their expectation and comes back, a really improved and a better player. Who will that be for this team? You know, I think you're confident about the floor with certain guys. You kind of know where they're going to be, but who else makes leaps? And with the early injuries, will it be a guy like Kira Lewis? You know, who knows? It could be. May he surprise? Will Jordan Hawkins surprise? Could Najee get even better? You know, I think the list goes on and on of certain guys, but there's going to be someone. There's always somebody, pretty much on every team, that, you know, destroys expectations and really plays above water or above what you thought they would. Once again, this team's going to figure it out. It's clearly going to have to come from within till a certain point, because if this team does play well and they're healthy, you probably should expect them to make some moves in the organization to say, okay, you know what? Now we're all in. You guys have got us here. You guys have finally seemed to be on the track to figuring it out. Now we'll commit and we'll make maybe a big move, or we'll make much better than what we've ended up seeing them do towards giving you some of the other pieces and parts that a team needs in 2023, or this particular team needs as it's currently constructed, and how the stars are aligned at the top, talent-wise. And then we'll end with ties directly into eternal leaps. And the reason you have to have it, because if you think this team's going to figure it out, maybe you believe sometimes less is more. There's been a lot made of the moves that the Pelicans did not make. There's been a lot made about, some guys, some fringe level players, maybe minimum individuals that they could have brought along. And that could definitely be true. Maybe a trade here that could have been made that, that you saw another team make that was cheap. You said the Pelicans could afford that. Maybe you didn't like what they did in the draft and you thought that they should have traded the pick. Maybe there was a larger move, and, instead of waiting till next year, possibly, as I started in the beginning of the show, maybe you thought Brandon Zion should have been moved then in the offseason. But instead, the Pelicans took a less is more approach. And they wouldn't be the first team that succeeded in that line of thinking. But some of those teams, like the Denver Nuggets, for example, at least they made the playoffs. So when they mention health, when they mention how important it is, we have to think that them getting back Jamal Murray, them getting back Michael Porter Jr. along with Nicole, and then adding around the edges and winning the championship. Hey, it worked for them, but it may not work for everybody. The Pelicans have had a lot more health issues to worry about, and the consistency levels hasn't been the same thing. But there are other examples, if you're looking throughout history, of team kind of just sitting on their hands for the lack of a better explanation, and putting the responsibility on some of the talents that they currently have before, as an organization, they decide to make moves and it work out. So maybe them not shaking what some believe was a promising team last year is going to work out just fine. I know Brandon Ingram talked about having the same faces, being able to build chemistry with, knowing what different guys want to do, not having different teammates, different important pieces in and out, from coaching to the players in your locker room. Your core players have, now for the most part, outside of CJ, a lot of these guys, even if they all haven't been on the floor together, they've been around each other. Is that where the magic happens? We'll have to see. Is getting a Jordan Hawkins versus maybe going out and trading for a guy like Buddy Hield, is that going to be one of those things that we look at and say, man, that was a really good pickup? Because you have to believe that's, if you believe they will figure it out, it has to be a reason. Maybe you believe adding Cody Zeller, that level of professionalism and dude that has started and it has been a serviceable big pretty much for the good majority of his career, even if he hasn't been spectacular. Maybe you think that's exactly what this team needs, and he's also one of those veterans. Maybe you think Larry Nance and him being healthy, and getting back to the guy that we saw earlier in the season, like so many others, is going to be huge for them. Jose Alvarado and those improvements, on and on. Maybe them not moving and them not making any drastic changes was exactly what they needed. Because if it's not, then we're going to revisit some earlier things in this list. That's pretty much it for this show. I'm really curious what you guys think about what it means for them to figure it out. I want to know in the comments what's your vision. Were there some things that I left out? Outside of jobs on the line, or possibly, or talents, or big time roster and organizational changes. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think before we get to part 2 of why they won't. And some of you will not enjoy that one, but appreciate y'all as always. I'll give y'all more news on the Andrew Lopez Spaces if you are unaware of how that's going to work. And yeah, man, appreciate y'all support as always. Here from DraftKings, and we're out.
Can you believe we've had 7 months without an NFL game? Crazy, right? Well, good thing that's over. NFL's here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is giving you a can't-miss offer. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 on any NFL game. DraftKings is hooking everyone up with game day greatness. Download now and use code BOOT to sign up. New customers can take home $200 in bonus bets instantly just for betting $5. That's code BOOT only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours.